Welcome to Lombardi's Legends podcast, and always brought to you by Leaf Spirits Vodka, the best vodka in Wisconsin or anywhere. And Wags, we're making cocktails. What do you have in store today?
Yeah, we're going to do a Wisco Mule. So, to start off with, we're going to do a ice-filled copper mug, and always using our Leaf Spirits Vodka, 1.5 ounces. And this is a really simple drink. You can do this at any tailgate. And then we're going to do a little splash of Cointreau or Grand Marnier. And then just fill with your favorite ginger beer. Ounces. Garnish with a lime. And even when the kids are screaming in the tailgate, drink tastes delicious. Here you go.
Let me try. Anybody who's a parent knows you got to have one once in a while.
Go Pack, go.
Go back, go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
Good evening. Welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast. I am Wags, and joining me, as always, is my cohort, Dane, and we are here tonight. Dane, we were just talking before we jumped on. This could be the last opportunity we have to have an Aaron Rodgers centered podcast. We don't actually have that many of them because we like to talk about the whole team, but it seems appropriate here. Haven't had a lot of opportunity just to talk Pack here this offseason. Been having some great guests on, but certainly with everything that's been going down over the last week or so with Aaron and the Packers, I think it is a good time to jump on here and give us the latest, get the latest thoughts. And certainly, Dane, I know you have some thoughts. You have some things you want to happen, things you're hoping to happen, and things that you expect to happen. So I think we can just dive right into it. And how are you doing here this evening as we are on full-fledged Aaron Watch here on social media?
Yeah, Wags, it feels like Panda Watch from Anchorman. Everybody's just waiting for the news to drop. It does. It's odd. It's a little odd. This very well. I can't believe it. We've been doing this podcast a long time. I think you and I have seen every snap Aaron Rodgers has ever played in the NFL. And this could be it. This could be the last podcast we do where Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. That's a pretty remarkable thing. I'm doing well though. I think that it's the fan base is split. We've been through this type of thing before. We lived through the Favre era. We're old enough to remember all of Brett's snaps too. And, we remember the change of the guard then. It worked out incredibly well. Remains to be seen what happens post Aaron Rodgers, but one way or another was going to happen, whether through retirement, whether through what have you. It just so happens that right now it looks like it might be happening through a trade to the New York Jets. Seems to be the likely destination. It's going to be a remarkable, next couple of days. But Wags, dare I say, it seems like it's a little bit imminent at this point that Aaron Rodgers is likely to be dealt to the New York Jets.
Yeah, but I'm not discounting the possibility that something unforeseen happens because we've seen this play out. This story, I should say, play out how many times, not just with the Packers, but all across all sports, where the thing that everybody's expecting to happen, and then something comes swooping in and changes at the last minute. So could there be another team that comes into play and really ups the ante here? We'll see. I'm sure that if the Packers are intent, and that's what the tea leaves are telling us, on moving on from Aaron, they're going to be open for all possibilities, and I'm sure they're making calls to all the other teams in the league that could use a quarterback and maybe are on that brink of contention. But Dane, I'm surprised. Before we get into our thoughts on that and a potential trip to New York for Aaron,
Yeah.
you posted on our Twitter page a poll
Yes.
yesterday, I believe. And I gotta say, even with the news that's been circulating, I did not expect as high a percentage of Packer fans to respond saying that the Packers should trade Aaron Rodgers. I believe the last time I checked that poll, a couple hundred votes, and 75%
Yeah.
of respondents said yes, they should trade Aaron Rodgers. Generally speaking, those of that follow us are pretty even keeled.
Yeah.
Packer fans, are not reactionary, and so the fact that I've been on the record saying that I thought the Packers should have traded Rodgers last year. Um, but that said, I was a little surprised. Were you, Dane, that high of a majority are saying, "Yep, it's time to move on from Aaron"?
Yeah, I was actually pretty shocked. I wonder, all offseason, we've kind of put that question out there a few times throughout the offseason. And every time we've put it out there, Wags, over the last couple of months, it's slowly but surely gone more and more to trade Aaron Rodgers. Now, I don't know what that means, but it's true. The first one we did was about 52-48. And from there, it's slowly changed. Now, it's not the most scientific thing in the world, but it is telling that a lot of folks that listen to our podcast and that follow, the majority, I think, are in support of moving on. And that doesn't mean it's not complicated. There's a complicated emotions. Aaron's been with this team 18 years. He's been the face of this team. He's won a ring with the Green Bay Packers. Anybody who wins a ring with the Packers is always going to be a legend in Green Bay. And Aaron Rodgers, I mean, more than many, right? More than almost all of them. But at the end of the day, I think that the Packer fans, real, true, green and gold Packer fans, understand that while it can be painful, it might be the best time for the team to move on and move forward, whether it's Jordan Love for 10 years or they find out what they have in Jordan and maybe it's somebody else. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of folks understand the business side of this, and that maybe it's time for the Packers to look at what the next options are. But it is going to be a tough pill to swallow, for myself included. Loved watching Aaron Rodgers for all these years.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of this is if New York right now is the only team that's in this discussion to trade for Rodgers, and that's if Rodgers wants to play, which I think he does. I don't think he's going to retire, as much as he might try to leverage that in order to help his own best interest as much as possible. I think that's really more of a negotiating ploy by Rodgers and his team at this point, to maybe decrease the leverage the Packers have. I don't know. That said, I think the other thing that's really been circulating is, what does the compensation look like for trading Aaron Rodgers? And I think there seems to be a lot of variance from national media and maybe more from Jets sources. They're really trying to tamp down the level of compensation that the Packers might get. And there's a lot of Packer fans out there that are saying they better not get anything less than 2 first rounders as a starting point. Which, given what we saw in the Russell Wilson trade last year, you could make some justification for it. But I think, as you said, this is complicated. We've got a 39-year-old quarterback that we don't know how much longer he's gonna play, and he's got a huge contract. So there's a lot of financial ramifications here for both the Packers and whoever trades for him. And the reality is he didn't play as well last year as he did coming off of 2 MVP seasons in the previous 2 years. So his value probably isn't at its peak, unfortunately, for the Packers right now. So there might be some disappointed Packer fans out there, but like in most negotiations, if the Jets, most Jets fans will probably be happy to pay whatever it takes. But if both sides are maybe a little bit disappointed by the total compensation package it takes to get Aaron Rodgers moved, it's probably a sign that that's a pretty good deal for both sides as far as the negotiation goes. So, Dane, I don't know if you have a feel for, sifting through some of the some of the muddy waters here on what's been reported. But do you have any idea of what you think? Maybe not what the Packers will get, but in your mind, just being rational about the situation and thinking about all factors, what would ultimately be comfortable with in terms of compensation in a trade package for Aaron?
Yeah, so I've got to think that, there's a lot that goes into this, but I got to think, Wags, that some of the compensation may be tied to a second year with Aaron Rodgers in New York. So right away, I think that. Now, Aaron Rodgers is a guy who's obviously 4 MVPs, ton of success in the league. That goes without saying, but he's also flirted with retirement for a number of seasons now. So if you're the New York Jets, you need to cover yourself on the back end. And I think that that's logical. And I think that the Packers would bend to that because, I think that they may be slightly motivated to move on from Aaron as well. So I think that there's some of that has to be read into it. I will say that I don't think that all of the New York Jets brass, including the ownership, flies across the country. They're all busy dudes and folks flying across the country on that plane and flying back and taking up all that time and energy to not give up a first-round pick. The cat's out of the bag. I think that Aaron Rodgers, they're so close at this point, and they don't really, who's the option after him? I don't know who it is. If you're the New York Jets, I think that they're all in trying to get him right now. And I think that the Packers should be able to use that to their advantage and squeeze at least a first-round pick this year out of the New York Jets. That's my opinion, based on all of the smoke that's around it. The Jets have way too much publicly invested at this point to drop the ball in New York. And I would be disappointed personally if they get less than a first-round pick this year for Aaron Rodgers' services, because the New York Jets truly believe that he's somebody that can push them not only into the playoffs, but deep into the playoffs. Then one first-round pick is not an awful lot to spend to get a guy like that into your organization. So for all of those reasons, I think a first-round pick is great. If they got 2 first-round picks, I'd lose my mind. I don't think that that's realistic personally, but a first round this year and then maybe something on the back end next year contingent on him coming back would be a really, really good benefit to the Packers. Now, if you add players, there's been rumors of a bunch of guys maybe in Green Bay that could go with Aaron Rodgers. That totally changes the stakes. But if we're talking just Aaron Rodgers, just this year, and with the possibility of next year, I think it's got to be a 1 and something on the back end next year.
Yeah, there has been some rumors about package deals that could be going on here. I think the pick next year makes a lot of sense. We talked about that in the first offseason pod we did over a month ago, where it really behooves the Packers to pick up extra assets for next season. They're not going to be in a good salary cap situation going into this season. I am super excited for potentially turning the reins over to Jordan Love. Don't get me wrong, but from a front office, perspective, you've also got to make sure that you have contingencies for Jordan Love as well. So picking up extra assets for the 2024 draft, that could be high draft picks in case Jordan Love does not work out. If that's the direction the Packers want to go, it makes a lot of sense. I think for, as you said, not only the Jets, but for the Packers as well. And what's more, is if Jordan Love works out and he's great, that's great for the Packers, but then now you can have extra picks to build around Jordan Love as a starting quarterback next year and hopefully be able to have a little bit more flexibility with their cap situation as well to build around him with maybe some veterans as well as some extra assets in the draft to really be able to make sure that you're improving the totality of this roster. This could be a quick turn. I think there's a lot of talent on this 53. So even without Aaron Rodgers, yes, they weren't a playoff team this year. So let's not lose sight of that either. But This is not a situation where I expect the Packers to go to the bottom of the NFC North for 2-3 years and do a massive rebuild. I think they're going to be competitive next year with Jordan Love, unless he massively underperforms, or we get a rash of injuries, or the defense takes a step back. But we've got the pieces on this roster to be extremely competitive and make a push, be maybe even better from a record standpoint than we were this past season. I know that might be a little bit bold, but then we go into 2024, and that's when I think you really start to build on the plan. So there's a lot of reasons I think that there's a benefit to picking up an extra pick or two in 2024. I wouldn't be surprised, Dane, if the Packers send a third or a fourth type with Rodgers to New York, or to another team if someone else comes swooping in order to offset perhaps picking up an extra higher draft pick this year. And then maybe they get a third or a second or something coming back in 2024. So there's that trade-off in the value, what the Packers might give up to send in order to get some additional draft capital coming back their way, not just this season, but I think in seasons moving forward.
Well, based on the Packers' track record in the third round over the last decade plus, they can take our third round picks, man. Well, they can take them. We'll figure something out on the back end there. One thing I wanted to bring up, and I know we got to hit up our sponsors at some point here, but one thing I want to bring up is, we touched on, there's been some rumors circulating about some possibilities of other Packers that could be part of this deal. I think let's start with David Bakhtiari. There's talk about it. Now, I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, Packers Twitter is on fire about it, but do you see that as a true possibility? We know that Aaron loves his guys, but I'm kind of curious because I don't think that it's wise for the Packers to just have a fire sale, because I want to see what Jordan can do with talent around him. So I want to kind of get your take on, could you see the Packers realistically trading David Bakhtiari as part of this deal with Aaron Rodgers?
No, unless they want to. I mean, there's some significant financial ramifications if you trade David Bakhtiari, let alone Aaron Rodgers, pre-June 1st. Now, I'm not a capologist, so I don't know how much they can realistically move around, or how much the receiving team can take and take on as far as the cap hit, or if the Packers are going to be eating all of that. I'm sure that's going to be part of driving the compensation, right? Because if Packers eat the most, if not all, of the cap hit for moving Rodgers and anyone else they throw in, now that other team is not only getting a good player, but they're getting a good player at an extreme value. So that costs money. I mean, basically in that situation, the team trading for Rodgers at all are essentially, sending picks to the Packers and paying the Packers. You're basically paying money for picks. And so the Packers are buying picks in that situation. And so the thing is if you trade Bakhtiari straight up, that's a $23 million cap hit for 2023. And so that's a tough pill to swallow. So you're telling me if you're throwing Bakhtiari and Aaron Rodgers in a package deal together, that's $63 million in dead cap hit that the Packers are going to absorb next season. I mean, that's one way to get out from under cap hell and really reset this thing. I'll acknowledge that. That would really surprise me, just from a financial standpoint. You said it. I know Aaron loves his guys, but honestly, I'm not a fan of package deals in any sport, especially when you've got the best player in the deal, because now all of a sudden I think you're also minimizing the value. It starts to spread out the value. If they want to trade David Bakhtiari, I think they should be taking calls from 31 other teams and not trying to shoehorn him in an Aaron Rodgers trade. That makes no sense to me. You can add in a guy that maybe the Packers don't have plans with, and they can't technically do this, I don't think, but like if let's say a Randall Cobb or a Bob Tunyon or Mercedes Lewis or someone like that, those guys aren't as far as I know, players that the Packers are able to actually technically include in a trade package.
Right.
But that's the type of player that you quote unquote throw in. You're not throwing in your franchise left tackle and one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL in a package deal. I just think that's way too complicated for both the Packers. It's way too complicated for the team that would be trying to trade for him, as much as I'm sure they would love to get two good players and not just one in Rodgers. And I think it's just ultimately it diminishes the value that you can get by not opening it up, because I'm sure there's a lot of other teams, despite the injury concerns, that would love to be able to trade for David Bakhtiari, and I think they would get more ultimately if those were separate deals rather than trying to combine them in one package.
Wags, that's really good insight. So I think we should pay our bills. We've got an awesome sponsor. Let's come back. There's been a defender that's also been circulated as a possible package to trade with Aaron Rodgers. We can talk about that, and then I'm going to surprise you and ask you, what's your favorite Rodgers memory as a Green Bay Packer? And I want to hear what that is as well. But let's start with let's pay the bills first. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good, and great tease there, Dane. But first, let's talk about hoops action here with DraftKings. NBA fans, it's time to bring the hoops action to the palm of your hand with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This week, new customers can bet $5 and win $200 in free bets instantly.
Plus, for a limited time, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every day. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app today, opt in, and place a same-game parlay on any NBA game. And if it doesn't hit, you'll get a free bet back. And Wags, one team that I'm really keeping an eye on are those Phoenix Suns. I saw that Kevin Durant might be out for a while. That's a wild one after just you NBA fans. Phoenix Suns trade for Durant, having some issues there. So that's pretty remarkable. So you never know what's going to happen in the NBA. And then obviously our hometown Milwaukee Bucks absolutely crushing it. Still going on a tear these days, winning a ton of basketball games. Giannis is truly the Greek freak. Love what he's been able to do in Milwaukee. There's no doubt about it. So, I mean, any game, always exciting, especially when you got DraftKings Sportsbook involved. So check out DraftKings Sportsbook.
That's right. So download the app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet $5 on the NBA and get $200 in free bets instantly, only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void in Ohio. See show notes for details. All right. So, Dane, you teased before the break that you had a couple of things you wanted to hit on. Can I take a guess at what defender? I've been keeping an eye on this, but package that I've seen out there, and I don't know if this is the same guy that you were seeing, Darnell Savage, possibly a guy that could be on the move. Probably would be, another, that's the type of player that I'm talking about. That is a quota throw in. Now, I'm not saying he's not worth some type of compensation, but he's not driving the value in this trade, right? And that might be a good reset for Darnell Savage. I think there's a lot of Packer fans that have probably given up on Darnell Savage. There's word that maybe we can try him out again in the slot. Rasul Douglas moved to safety, but there's just a lot of questions at the back end of the secondary, and it looks like Adrian Amos might be moving on to new opportunities as well. So this could be a hard reset of the safety position. But yeah, Dane, I'm curious what your thoughts are if Darnell Savage is on the move, either in a package deal with Aaron, or maybe that's a separate deal that the Packers execute as well.
Yeah, I mean, the sense that would make for New York, right, is Darnell comes in, his money's locked in for the year. He's on his 5th-year option. So, it would make sense, I think, for New York, a change of scenery, as you mentioned, for Darnell, who's showed a lot of flashes in his career in Green Bay. So, I know he had a down year last year, but he's showed some real flashes. The question is, are the Packers ready to give up? I thought that he looked pretty good in the slot at times near the end of the season. He looked a little bit more reinvigorated, closer to the line of scrimmage. Or are the Packers like, it's time to move on and as you said, press reset. So there are holes, I think, on this Packers team, and the secondary is one that I think last year going into the offseason at this time, we were thinking how strong it was going to be. There was clearly some setbacks there at a number of spots. So Savage could potentially be gone. But I still would be surprised if Darnell Savage is traded from the Packers. I think that there's enough other holes on this team. And unless Savage sweetener, so to speak, really bumps up some value somewhere for the Packers, I think there's probably more value to him on the roster, especially with the potential that he showed late in the season, kind of playing in what seems to be a natural position of the slot for him. I think that it would be more of a negative than a positive to get out from under Darnell Savage's year when they've really under contract for one season left anyway. Let's see what he can do. And if he hits, great. If not, then maybe they part ways in the offseason.
Yeah, I think one thing that's unique about Darnell is opposite of David Bakhtiari and Aaron Rodgers. They can trade him before June 1st, and he wouldn't count a cent against the cap, according to Over the Cap. So, that's something that, from a financial perspective, I was surprised that they picked up his 5th-year option. I mean, granted, at the time, he had probably shown enough that the Packers felt that he was still in their future, but it might make sense just to get out from under that now. And then if the Packers are targeting some other guys in free agency or in the draft that they want to rebuild this position, that allows them to use some of that money that frees up and reinvest in some new guys that they can rebuild that position. So it wouldn't be a shock. That's not a guy that we're going to get much for at this point. Realistically, you're probably looking at a late round pick for Darnell Savage. Unfortunately, former first round pick, but I don't think that's a sell high value, to say the least, right now. So, the reality is he's only got 1 year left on his deal. So there's not a lot of benefit to the Packers holding on to him either, because if he outperforms and bounces back, that's great. But then you've got a kind of a decision to make: are you actually going to pay the guy in a long-term deal? He's been a little bit inconsistent. So unless he comes back and, starts playing like an all-pro all of a sudden, right. I don't think it's likely that Darnell Savage at this point is in the long-term future of the Packers. So usually we try to be a year ahead of those situations, especially on like the offensive line. But we've seen it at other position groups as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, Dane, if Darnell Savage is on the move, regardless of whether that's part of an Aaron Rodgers trade package or if that's just a separate deal that they make.
Interesting stuff, man. I mean, this is all what's your timeline? What do you think the timeline is here? There's so much smoke at this point. Do you think it happens? We're recording this Thursday night. Does this happen before the weekend hits, or is this a next week thing?
Dane, I have to be honest with you. I've been pretty busy with work, but I've still been finding time, once every hour or two to get on Twitter and refresh everything just to see if I'm like way behind or if anything's actually happening. This doesn't surprise me. We talked a few weeks ago, and we said then this is going to stretch out. It was March 20th. It was 5 or 6 days after free agency opened last year before Aaron announced he was coming back to the Packers. I think I a little bit lost memory of exactly what happened first. I think Aaron announced he was coming back, and then Devontae Adams got traded. So
that's right. He came back a couple days later. Yep.
Yeah. So we were expecting once Aaron was back that they were going to figure out something with Devontae, and then that bomb hit. So that was, not ideal. The Packers didn't have a lot of space in free agency to do anything. They mostly just rolled things back last year. So they made it work. But you don't want to be a week, 2 weeks behind in free agency, regardless of how active they're going to be trying to figure these things out. So I think they're probably pushing hard to figure this out I'm sure Aaron realizes that if he's going to continue to play and it's not for the Packers, he's not doing his new team any favors if he drags us out either. So he's got two teams that he's kind of probably doesn't really care about about the Packers too much at this point. I mean, I'm sure it's professional-ish, but he also is, I'm sure, going to want to accommodate his new team as well, so they can make plans and build the best team they can around him. So I do expect this to happen anytime. I'm not expecting we'll be lucky enough for it to happen before we get off this pod tonight. But I think it's going to be probably within the next few days.
Yeah, and I think it's noteworthy. Free agency starts the 15th, but legal tampering starts a couple days before that. So effectively, free agency starts the 13th or so, I would argue. So it's coming up real quick. I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen by Monday. My jaw might hit the floor one way or another. I ask you then, Wags.
The only thing I would interrupt, the only reason it might drag out is if both parties are really trying to squeeze and leverage and get the best deal possible. And I'm sure that from the Packers' perspective, here's the reality. I think you said it earlier. The Jets, if it is just the Jets, they've got a lot more to lose in my mind by letting this slip through.
Yes,
they really do. You can say what you want. They can say, well, we're bidding. Why would we overpay? We're bidding against ourselves. Aaron Rodgers is still under contract with the Green Bay Packers right now. There's not a rule that they have to trade Aaron Rodgers. So that's one possibility we haven't talked about. It's not 100% done deal that this happens, right, Dane? Right. But I think if you're the Packers, it would behoove you to be willing to go to the rail and not accept a underwhelming offer, even if it's just one team out there bidding. Ultimately, I think they'll probably figure out a way to get it done if both parties want to make it happen. But that would be one reason why it might extend out a little bit. Is it's just a classic negotiation tactic to try to gain as much leverage and stare the guy down on the other side of the table and see how bad do you want this. And ultimately, I think the team that's trying to acquire the star player is usually the one that's going to fold.
Yeah, no. So I totally agree. So all of that said, what are the chances? We're saying it's a foregone conclusion, more or less. What are the chances Roger just says, you know what, 18 years is enough, I'm retiring? What are the odds of that out of 1 to 100?
I actually think it's more likely that Aaron doesn't get traded right away, and it becomes even more of a mess, and he's still on the Packers than it is that he retires.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't put that as the most likely outcome. Let's call that maybe like 15%. I think it's heavily in that 85 to 90% or higher chance that he gets traded. But until it actually happens, honestly, I don't think retirement is that much on the table. Now, here's the thing. If he doesn't get traded, it doesn't have to happen on March 15th, by the way. As much as we want it to happen, it doesn't have to. And the Jets are out of the picture all of a sudden. Does that open it up to other teams around the league? Or then does he get so uncomfortable about the Packers situation that then he says, you know what, I'm going to retire, and that becomes a leverage play to try to force the Packers' hand into accepting a lesser deal and making it happen? That's possible. So, I'm not discounting that this is not a clean break or separation, and that things don't get like super crazy. We've lived through it before with Favre.
We have.
And so would it be shocking if history repeated itself and Aaron's still on the Packers on April 1st? He announces he's going to retire, and this stretches out into June, and all of a sudden we've got flight trackers on Aaron Rodgers jet setting around the country as we get closer to training camp, and teams are lowballing the Packers on an Aaron Rodgers offer. I really, 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 really hope that doesn't happen, Dane.
Mhm.
But I also, something tells me that we'd be a little bit foolish to discount that as a possibility. We've seen it before. We know how Aaron rolls.
Mhm.
And I don't think the Packers are going to give in and accept a low ball offer. I think they're going to want to try to be stubborn and ride this out and get the best possible deal that they can.
So, as this could potentially be the last podcast ever with Aaron Rodgers as starting quarterback to the Green Bay Packers, I gotta ask, man. There's so many great memories. There's so many incredible moments. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, right? Making plays. Any one of them particularly special to you? Anything that really sticks out to you?
So, Dean, you're right. There are so many. I don't know why, but there's one that stands out, and it wasn't really that consequential of a game in the grand scheme of things. It
Mhm.
wasn't, the Super Bowl. It wasn't one of the NFC Championship games. Um, but 2015, we're in Detroit in, I believe, early December, late November, and the Packers just played terrible the entire first half. I think they got 3 points in the first half. Detroit was awful that year. They were up like 16-3 at halftime. Dane, I'm living out in Wyoming at the time. I'm out in Jackson Hole, sitting at a bar, and there's not any other Packer fans around, but there was one Lions fan out there that happened to be sitting 2 stools down, and she was very nice. She wasn't obnoxious. But her boyfriend slash husband was, kind of crowing a little bit.
Mhm.
And I was extremely frustrated. I got maybe some people that got some annoyed with them too. So all of a sudden, Packers start to come back a little bit. They still don't look that good. And it doesn't look like there's any chance that we're going to pull this out. But we've got a little momentum. And Dane, time is ticking out. Aaron goes and rolls out to the right, soars the ball 70 yards in the air in Ford Field, and Richard Rodgers goes up and plucks it out
Mhm.
for the game-winning touchdown. I just about jumped off the stool, and the entire bar was high-fiving me. I turned around. The Lions fan was nowhere to be seen. I think that was just one of those moments where maybe it was because of where I was and I wasn't around my normal Packer fan.
Mhm.
But it was one of those times where it was just so unlikely. And that was one of many Hail Mary passes that Aaron Rodgers has thrown in his career that were not likely. But I think I distinctly remember, I probably called you really,
Yeah,
really
we talked. It
close.
was like midnight. Yeah,
Yeah,
we were screaming.
so this was pre-pod, but anyway, so I don't know why, but that one will always stick out in my mind to me. There were so many of them.
Yeah.
You could think of many with the Bears in the playoffs. There's lots of them that you could run through, but that's one that definitely sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, it's a great moment. And John in our chat says the Bears game when he told him he owns them. I mean, you said it, Wags. The Bears, the Rodgers to Cobb after Rodgers comes back off that injury to make the playoffs. Rodgers in the NFC Championship game goes to Chicago, guts the Bears, throws the belt on. All of those moments, I think, in Chicago. I gotta tell you that one time we were at a game, one of the many times we've gone to a game together, Wags. And again, not the most consequential game ever. It wasn't a playoff game or a Super Bowl or any of that, but it was that Week 17 game when they only played back when there was only 17 games in a year, and the Packers needed to beat the Detroit Lions to win the North, if I recall. I don't remember what year this was, but it's, in the last 7 or so years. And Rodgers throws a touchdown. I believe it was to Cobb, goes down, looks like he tore his knee or something from the stands. It looked bad. It was in the first half. And, they get him off the field. I think they carted him off the field or they carried him off. However they got him off the field. Matt Flynn came in. and it looked like our hopes might have been dashed. The Lions took the lead. It was pretty tough. The second half starts. Matt Flynn's still in the game. Packers have possession, the first possession. They go 3 and out. We punt the ball. We're in Lambeau. We have no idea what's going on with Rodgers. We don't have the announcers in our ears. And then over in the corner, you start to hear a low roar. And Rodgers is walking out, and he's still in his shoulder pads. And Lambeau just starts getting louder and louder and louder. Mind you, the Detroit Lions have the football at this point. The offense has the ball for Detroit. And it gets louder and louder as Rodgers makes his way back to the sideline, still in shoulder pads. And I'll never forget, we were all like, well, he's in pads. That's good. And everybody's kind of chattering in the stands. And then we saw Aaron Rodgers put a helmet on and start throwing the ball. And we were like, is he going back in this football game? And then when he started walking out on the field, limping to the huddle, the crowd was chanting MVP, MVP as he kind of sauntered back onto the field. Wouldn't you know it, comes back, throws a couple more dimes, wins that game. The Packers win the North yet again at Lambeau Field, week 17. Snow was coming down. It was a perfect moment, a perfect encapsulation of how awesome Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay. He's had so many great moments, but that one, us being there in person to see that was such a great memory. And I'll always remember it. No matter how this thing wraps up, there will always be a special place for us with Aaron Rodgers. And whenever he does retire, he's always going to be one of the greatest players to ever play in Green Bay.
Yeah, and that's another really good one that definitely stands out. What you folks listening don't know is that Dane and I and the two buddies that went with us had been to several games, and the Packers had never won when we'd gone as a group. And I distinctly remember when Rodgers got hurt. I believe, Dane, it might have been you or one of our buddy Schmitty that turned and said, we may never be able to go to a Packer game together again.
Yeah, right.
And I said jokingly, because I don't want to take too much credit for this. I was like, no, this is going to be like the Paul Pierce wheelchair game. Rodgers is going to come back in the second half. And I mean, I'm sorry, sure as shit. Like, I couldn't believe it. I had goosebumps when that actually happened. But yeah, that was certainly an incredible moment to witness live as well. So we've had many others, and thankfully we've had some other Packer wins since then as well. So we are not bad luck officially. We've had a spotty record, but we've done okay.
I would argue we probably should have gone to that NFC Championship game against Tampa Bay. We were at the game when they beat Seattle, which was a huge one. We were at a game where they beat the Rams in the playoffs as well. We've been to some awesome division round games over the years where the Packers have won at Lambeau Field. So it was always a joy to watch Rodgers play. And when he was on, there's nobody that can throw a football like Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So if this is indeed the swan song, I think we've summed up with some great memory of Stain, and that's all I can say. And if Aaron were to listen, all I would say is thanks, man, for
Aaron.
all of the amazing memories over the years as a Packer. We've had ups and downs between you and our fellow fan base, certainly, but way more highs than lows, no doubt about that. And just know that you are truly appreciated no matter what you do and wherever you go. If you come back and retire in 2 weeks, I will never, ever forgive you. But short of that, you're all good.
Yeah, and one day when we look forward to, if this is it, we look forward to number 12 never being worn by anybody else again. They're going to throw that up there on the Ring of Honor with some of the other greatest players to ever play the game of football that happen to be in Green Bay as well.
All right, I think that sums it up, Dane. The folks, thanks so much for listening with us this evening. We expect to be back. We rescheduled a special guest. We didn't reschedule. He asked to reschedule, of course. So we'll be back with that in the probably next week.
Next week, like. We're already talking about dates. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think once this actually happens, I don't know if I'm going to have too many more thoughts, honestly. But I'm excited to officially get into free agency. So we'll definitely have an episode coming up once that opens up, and we have a little bit more clarity of what the direction is, hopefully, for the Packers, and we can move forward and maybe make some projections on some of the signings that they're going to be able to make, and start to look ahead at the draft coming up here in just over a month as well. So lots of good things on tap. So folks, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Tonight. Yep, absolutely. But stay tuned because we got a lot more content coming out in the coming weeks as well. So as always, be legendary and go Pack,
go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will